Sonic the Hedgehog, Saga's attempt at a radical new mascot for a new generation that just exploded into a beloved gaming icon. From humble beginnings as the mascot for Saga's hardware, to having a whole host of games, cartoons, comics, and even a Macy's parade float under his belt. I'm Chris, the only member of Cryptid Productions, and today we're going to explore Mr. Hedgehog's early history. So sit back, grab some Crystal Pepsi, and break out the VCR because it's about to get really 90s up in here. Now, Sonic's beginnings start in 1990 when Saga put a request to the Research and Development Department for a character that could really sell a game and replace their current mascot and compete with Nintendo's Mario. The most notable designs submitted included characters that were later retooled into Mighty the Armadillo and Ristar, the hero of a completely separate Saga title. There was also a character made to resemble Theodore Roosevelt in pajamas that was later recycled into Dr. Robotnik's classic design. A quick disclaimer here is that I do not speak Japanese, so forgive me if I butcher these impending names. An artist named Naito Oshima submitted a design for an anthropomorphic hedgehog that he gave the production name of Mr. Needlemouse. This was obviously the winner and became Sonic himself. Naito, as well as the programmer of the first game, Yuji Naka, and its level designer, Hirokazu Yasuhara, are generally credited with being the creators of the franchise. Of course, his debut is considered his self-titled game for the Sega Genesis and Master System, but he also appeared during the same year, in 1991, in a game called Sonic Eraser for Saga's download service. It's debated which was actually his first appearance, because there's no clear release date on record for Sonic Eraser. In the same year, he also appeared in an arcade game called Waku Waku Sonic Patrol Car, where he chases down criminals in a police car. Arcade Machine is a bit generous, because it was actually a kiddie ride shaped like a police car that had a primitive arcade game built into the dashboard controlled with the steering wheel. It's hard to describe this setup, so I'll actually display a picture of it for you right now. Obviously, the classic games continued with Sonic 2 in 1992, which introduced Miles Prower, better known as Tails, his kid sidekick that is generally treated as a little brother to the Blue Blur. Tails has become an integral part of his character, and their team name in one later title is even Unbreakable Bond. Sonic 2 was also sort of the game that perfected the formula with things like the addition of Sonic's famous Spin Dash. A bit of a dark piece of trivia is that the Game Gear and Master System version of Sonic 2, which was far different from its 16-bit counterpart, actually has a pretty infamous bad ending obtained by not collecting all 6 Chaos Emeralds. The ending is infamous because it implies Robotnik actually kills Tails and marks what might be the darkest moment in the classic Sonic titles. In 1993, there was an arcade game called Saga Sonic the Hedgehog that introduced Ray the Flying Squirrel and Mighty the Armadillo. If any of you have ever played Sonic 3D Blast, this game is an isometric platformer in a similar vein. If you've never heard of it, that's quite understandable because issues emulating the trackball control scheme of the arcade cabinet means this title has never been ported to a home console. The other arcade game in 1993 was a title called Saga Sonic Cosmo Fighter. No, not that Cosmo, that comes far later. This is basically a clone of Patrol Car where you pilot a spaceship instead of driving a car. It's a similar setup, but the game is inside a spaceship-shaped ride instead of a car. 1993, which you can tell by now was an interesting year for Sonic, is also when the first 2 of 3 animated series created in the 90s premiered. The first was Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, a show heavily influenced by classic cartoons. It was in fact directed by Kent Butterworth, who also worked on shows such as Tiny Toons. The second was merely titled Sonic the Hedgehog, and generally referred to as Sonic Sat AM by fans, to denote that it aired in a Saturday morning cartoon time slot. It focused on Sonic as a member of a band of freedom fighters led by Princess Sally Acorn that sought to free their world from Robotnik's evil after he had managed to take over Mobius and turn large amounts of its citizens into mindless robots. Sadly, the show was cut down in its prime and on a cliffhanger after 2 seasons totaling 26 episodes. Ben Hurst, the man considered the creator of the show by fans, passed away in 2010 before any of his ideas for further seasons could be realized. A comic book published by Archie Comics based in the same universe also began publication roughly at the same time, give or take a few months. Despite enough internal strife to do an entire video on, and the infamous Penders lawsuit, the comic still runs to this day. The Guinness Book of World Records even recognizes it as the longest-running comic based on a video game at nearly a quarter of a century as of this video. In 1993, Sonic CD was released, the game in which Sonic's love interest, Amy Rose, made her first appearance. Sonic CD was the killer app for the first of 2 add-ons for the Sega Genesis, which allowed it to use CD-based games. The use of the extra storage space in the CD allowed for it to use full motion video, such as the intro video you're seeing for Sonic CD right now, as well as CD quality. Sonic the Hedgehog 3 in 1994 was an interesting beast because it was released alongside Sonic and Knuckles, a game that essentially functions as an early version of downloadable content. Not only was it a sequel to Sonic 3 with playable levels for both Sonic and Knuckles, but it featured contacts on the top of the cart to plug another game into it. Doing this with either Sonic 2 or Sonic 3 allowed you to play slightly modified versions of the games with Knuckles instead of Sonic and Tails. This effectively made it like an early version of extra character DLC. In this year, we also got a second add-on for the Genesis, the 32X of extra graphical horsepower. The only Sonic game for this system was Knuckles Chaotix, a game starring Knuckles himself and several of his friends you might know now as the members of Team Chaotix. The notable thing about this is the AI partner filling Tails' role is connected to you by a magical chain. This means you get an interesting dynamic of working together to achieve progress instead of weighing each other down like an anchor in multiplayer. This is where Sonic's tenure on the Genesis ends, as the Sega Saturn was released on the coattails of the 32X. Didn't really have a big presence on the Saturn, as there was really only 3 games for the system. The first was a port of Sonic 3D Blast. The second was an enhanced compilation of the Genesis titles. And the third was the only unique Sonic game for the Sega Saturn, Sonic R. This is the racing game where the infamous Tails doll of internet legend came from. There was one more arcade game in the 90s that I'm aware of from my research, and that's Sonic the Fighters, a 3D fighting game not dissimilar from Virtua Fighter with the Sonic cast. It got a limited release in the US where it was renamed Sonic Championship, but it was sort of swept under the rug because Saga of America thought it was too violent. Notably, Honey the Cat, a character now mostly utilized in the comics, came from this game, but in the original arcade version, she was actually dummied out, which means not playable, but still in the code. She was only found with the release of the GameCube port when people started picking around in the files. She herself is based on Honey from Fighting Vipers, the game whose engine was modified to create Sonic the Fighters. To close out this video, I feel I should round out the 90s cartoon trilogy by introducing Sonic Underground, a show that came at the very end of the era in 1990. It was a wild trek off the beaten path that had a similar tone and setting to Sad AM, but took place in a universe where Sonic was a prince with a twin brother and sister. They spent the 40 episodes searching for their mother to fulfill a prophecy, where they'd unite to overthrow a robot and its tyranny for good. It's also a musical show, so I'll let the triplets play us out.